Are you ready for me? What's up guys? Chef Sawyer coming at you with my first cooking video ever. Be careful because we're in for a bumpy ride. Today I'm showing you how to make a cheesesteak and french fries all from scratch like a professional. So first thing you want is a nice sharp knife. But before you even touch your knife, we gotta make sure our cutting board is secured because it can slide around real easy on me. That's dangerous. So what we gotta do is we gotta take some damp paper towels or even a regular towel if you would like, and put them on the corner of the cutting board. And now we know that's secure, that's not going anywhere. For a cheesesteak, every good cheesesteak needs caramelized onions. Those take a long time to do properly. I like them nice and thin. It's gonna take a long time to caramelize these. And you wanna do it on a nice low heat in a nice thick bottom pan. Once that is all done, then we can now just make sure they're all separated into their little strands. Go ahead and get all of our onions in there. And like I said, caramelized onions is a labor of love. This requires patience, and these will cook for maybe upwards of 1 hour on a very, very low temperature. For homemade french fries, the first thing we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna wanna have nice, long planks of your potato. You want to cut it at about the thickness of a french fry. So that looks about standard. And then all we're going to do from there is just cut it into long, thin strands. And I will repeat this process for the whole potato. And that is going to leave us with beautifully long, perfectly shaped french fries. Something that cooks do to save themselves a lot of time in the restaurant. This comes with some experience. You can just stack them all up. You can stack up 1, 2, 3, 10 layers if you're comfortable. And then I'm just gonna make sure I get through and that I'm getting all 3 layers to the same exact size. And here you'll see we have some nice, long, skinny french fries. Now I recommend leaving the skin on. You guys don't have to. This is a russet potato, and russet potatoes are generally regarded as one of the best for french fries. Now it is important to go ahead and give your potatoes a rinse. You want to get rid of all the extra starch on the potato. Ideally, if you have time, you would want to soak these potatoes in cold water for at least a couple of hours, and that will draw out a lot of the starch in them. But this is going to help them get a more crispy, finished product. While the onion caramelizes, then we will have to blanch our french fries. This is how restaurants get restaurant quality french fries. This is the little secret trick that the people at home don't know about. So to blanch the french fries means to cook them before you cook them. We're gonna cook them halfway at a lower temperature in the same oil. So we have it set to a very low heat, and we're just gonna put them in the hot oil for a couple of minutes, and then we're gonna take them out and drain them on this sheet tray that's lined with some paper towel. Onion. When the onions are properly caramelized, they will be the most beautiful golden brown color. And the flavor profile will be sweet. You'll know when it's happening, people. I know the oil's not ready yet. I can dip my fry in and there's no bubbles. You don't want it to be at a completely frying temperature like 350. You should still see some bubbles, but it needs to be minimal amount. We're getting there, we're very close. So the oil is at the proper temperature, and now all I'm gonna do is gonna take a few fries at a time. You don't wanna do too much because you don't wanna overcrowd the pan. If I put in too many french fries, these still have a lot of moisture, and what's gonna happen is they're gonna start to steam instead of fry, and that's not what we want. We want them crispy. In general, in cooking, you never want to overcrowd your pan. You want plenty of space for everything to do what it's supposed to do. I'll give it a nice stirry stir so that they don't stick together. And this gentle bubble is exactly what you want for your first blanch. So these are going to sit in the warm oil for maybe about 2 to 3 minutes until they start to get a little soft, but they're still raw and crunchy in the middle. In the oil, I actually did something a little special. I had a lot of bacon fat on hand. So what I did was I mixed a little bit of vegetable oil and I put some bacon fat. So these are going to be bacon fat fried French fries. That's a mouthful, isn't it? But for those who are unfamiliar with me, the cheesesteak is a very important part of my childhood and my diet of the entire life that I've lived thus far. Because I grew up in the South Jersey area, really close to Philly, and you know, even when you're not in Philly, every restaurant around still serves the cheesesteak, which is a staple of the area. This has just been one of my favorite dishes to cook, my favorite dishes to eat. It's a very important part of me and who I am. I am passionate about the cheesesteak, which, by the way, in the Philly area, we just call it a cheesesteak. It's not a Philly cheesesteak because that's the only kind of cheesesteak there is. So if anybody ever says to me, hey Sawyer, do you want a Philly cheesesteak? The answer is usually no, because if they say Philly cheesesteak, I know immediately that they've probably never had a real one. The French fries, I can see they're starting to get a little translucent. This is perfect. So I'm just going to use a slotted spoon. I'm going to pull out all the potatoes, and they're exactly where we want them right now. This is going to have the result being a soft, fluffy middle like mashed potatoes, and a perfectly crispy outside like your favorite French fry. You see how they're a little shiny and a little soft? Perfect. Now people might say, Sawyer, why don't you have a bigger pan? Sawyer, why don't you just cook your French fries in your fryer? Well, guess what? I use like a whole bottle of vegetable oil in this thing, and I don't just be having 10 bottles of vegetable oil on hand, so give me a break. They're flexible, they're a little cooked, but they're not all the way cooked. If I did this, it would still be a little hard and raw in the middle, but as soon as we turn the temperature of the oil up and we drop them in for the second time to get them nice and crispy, it's gonna be the perfect French fry. These bacon fried French fries are about to be bussin'. And in a little while, I'm gonna turn the heat all the way up and fry them like normal. Every French fry you buy in the store, the frozen brands, are already gonna have this step done. Most of those French fries are pre-cooked by the time you open the bag and they get to you. So by the time you put them in the oven or put them in your fryer at home or however you do it, they're ready to get crispy already because the businesses take this step away from you. So this is the choice cut for a cheesesteak all the time. This is a ribeye, and why ribeyes are perfect is because they have a great marbling to them. And when I say marbling, I mean all these little white lines. It's called the intramuscular fat, the fat in between the meat. This is what provides flavor. So all of the steaks pretty much will have this cap of fat around the outside, but what's inside here is what counts. This is called the BMS, or the beef marbling score. So the fat is where the flavor comes in. You know, fat is flavor, it is true. So the more marbling you have in your steak, the tastier and more unhealthy your end product will be. But that's okay, because Paula Deen taught us we add butter to things and it makes us feel good. And I like to live my life thinking that. So what I'm gonna do, 1 hour before I cook my steak, is I'm gonna stick it in the freezer so it can get semi-frozen. And what this does is it makes it hard, which makes slicing it very thinly easier. Coffee time. Magnifique. Arequipe, this is my favorite thing to add to my coffee. It's like a Colombian caramel sauce, and it's perfect. Great sweetener. That's that good. And the ice cube should float. So the caramelized onions, this is what they look like halfway done. You can see how they're starting to develop a little bit of color. It's like a light caramel. It's been about 30-45 minutes. You can go faster if you'd like. I have it on the lowest heat, but the higher your heat is, the more you risk burning your onions, and I have all day. So going low and slow is the way to go. So one thing that is optional on a cheesesteak, but I do prefer it and I love it, and a lot of people serve it this way in the Philadelphia area, is mushrooms. This is a controversial ingredient, but me and my family, we love them, so I'm just gonna give them a nice little choppy chop. And once they are all sliced down into appropriately sized pieces. I'm just gonna put them into a hot saute pan that I have heating up. Mushrooms have a lot of moisture, which means you wanna start on a hot pan so that they can properly release their moisture. I'm gonna hit the mushrooms with just a little bit of salt. Garlic is an optional step in the cheesesteak process, but as an Italian, we put garlic on everything. So I'm gonna add it to the onions just a little bit. All it does is add extra flavor. The garlic does not need nearly as long as the onions to cook. We're cooking now. So the mushrooms are looking just about done. All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take them out and reserve them in this bowl until everything is ready to assemble. Now we're gonna start building our cheese sauce. For a cheese sauce, you're gonna wanna start with milk. I prefer whole milk just because fat is flavor, as I have said, and a little extra butter. And you're gonna get that nice and warm and just heat it up a little bit. Not too hot. You definitely don't want this at a rolling boil, or else when you put your cheese in, it's gonna start to separate, it'll break. Just warm enough to melt the cheese gently. The cheeses I'm using today for my sauce, in the Philly region we call it whiz, cheese whiz. I have a provolone, I have a sharp cheddar, I have a nice processed American for that good melty, gooey creaminess, and I have just a little of that sophisticated Parmigiano Reggiano. I'm just gonna hit it with a little Grady grate, you know what I'm saying? Let's get a shot of those caramelized onions. They're starting to look really good. That's almost where we want it. You call it basically like an onion jam because I added no sugar to this, but the natural sweetness of the onion comes out when you cook it so long like this. You don't wanna add too much at once or it'll clump together and stick into a hard ball. If you wanna rip it into pieces, that's good. I'm just gonna add a couple bits of every cheese while I'm constantly stirring, mixy. Slowly, the cheese will melt, the cheese will thicken it up, and we'll get to that perfect sauce consistency that we want. And I must specify that this should be done on a very low heat, low to medium at max. And now I'm just gonna stand here and make sure this all gets emulsified properly, and I'm gonna mix it until I see no more chunks of cheese, and then I'll continue on with the rest of it. Our milk has come up to proper temperature. You can see the cheese is starting to blend, and I just keep hitting it with a light whisk. I wanna make sure not to scratch the bottom of my pan, but I also need the milk and the cheese to emulsify together, and we're getting this beautiful, cheesy stringiness, and this is what you love to see on your food, right there. Salt. A lot of people will hit it with white pepper. I prefer a black pepper blend. I have red, white, and black peppercorns in there. And now I'm just gonna grate a little bit of Parmigiano Reggiano. And that's gonna give us a little bit of salty sharpness. God, look at that sauce. Man, that sauce. This is exactly what we want. And I have this beautiful French bread. This is super soft and baked fresh daily according to the tag. Now, can we trust tags? Who knows? Just like how I watch the people at Subway do it. And voila, that is a beautiful French bread. And here's another restaurant tip that no one is gonna teach you, is that the reason why your sandwiches taste so good is because before they toast your bread, they're hitting the roll with just a little bit of butter. They're brushing on a perfect layer just like this, and then they're gonna grill it face down and get it crispy and delicious. So I'm gonna put it in the oven, which I have preheating now. That's the thing with cooking, you always gotta stay one step ahead of the food. It's gonna toast for about 5 minutes just until it's crispy, and we're gonna start cooking our steak now. I have my pan for the steak heating up. I have that one on max heat. There's no too high when you're cooking a steak. I like it to be cooked quickly, you get a nice sear, you activate that Maillard reaction, and you bring out the flavors of the steak. My oil for my fries is heating up. So now all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this partially frozen ribeye, and I'm just gonna shave it as thin as I can by hand into these beautiful little strips of meat. And this is exactly what comes in a cheesesteak. Thinly shaved ribeye. Nothing compares to a nice fresh ribeye shaved thin. I don't want all this fat. I'm gonna trim it to my liking. You can see I'm never at risk of cutting myself because of how I curl my fingers. You always want to tuck your fingertips in, so when I come straight down, I'll never have a chance of cutting myself. When you're slicing the steak thin like this, it doesn't take very long to cook at all. You'll be done If you're on a high heat, your meat should be done in less than 5 minutes. Now you can season the pan with whatever oil you want. I mean, I could even take this piece of beef that I took off the ribeye and I can oil the pan like that. A big part of cooking, besides thinking ahead, is knowing how to utilize all of your products. So there's no need for me to pour olive oil when I have a nice big piece of beef fat right here. This will season the pan beautifully. It's always important to taste your food. You don't know if it tastes good unless you try it. So cooks, we constantly we're taking a quick taste, seeing how the seasoning is, and adjusting accordingly. If it needs more salt, if it needs less salt, if it needs more pepper. So by the time it arrives to the guest, it's tasting perfect. Here's how quick we're gonna go. It's gonna be boom, boom, boom. Ready? Bread in the oven to get toasted. We're gonna drop some French fries into the hot oil. That's the perfect temperature. Be careful with a splashy, you know, that can cause a casualty or two. So you can see our fries are crisping up amazingly. They're looking really good. You gotta do them in small batches because sometimes oil expands when you put the fries in and it can bubble up over the top and that can be a potential fire hazard.
Uh-oh, sigh.
As soon as you take anything out of a fryer, but especially French fries, then you gotta hit them with a little salt because the hot oil will melt the salt and it will adhere to the French fry better, making it more delicious. So this product looks #tasty AF. Throw it all in there. It's important to spread it out. You wanna let it cook evenly and you want the individual strands of meat to stand alone. You don't want them to clump together into some sort of big beef ball. And this will also get hit with some salt and some pepper as well. Bam, bam, salt man. And now I'm not gonna touch it. I'm gonna leave it there undisturbed for maybe 1 minute until it develops a nice crust on the bottom, at which point I'll mix it up. I'm gonna give my beef a shake. This is what you're looking for. Right here. This brownness, that's the Maillard reaction. That's when your beef starts getting extra flavor. These are the ones that we blanched earlier, and this is the finished product. Nice and crispy. It's like a boardwalk fry. That's what we call them in Jersey, a boardwalk fry. This is the thing about cooking, guys. There's so much going on at once. I gotta make sure my beef doesn't overcook. I gotta make sure my French fries don't get too crispy in here. My bread, I think my bread is looking good. Nice and hard and crispy. That's exactly where we want it. So this is the final product of our caramelized onions. They look perfect to me, and I'm just gonna give that a nice smear over the whole roll. This sweetness, onion, garlicky flavor, it provides a lot for the sandwich. And that looks perfect, just like that. Get a little in that corner. You don't want to neglect any parts of the bread. So as even as possible is how we like it here. Next up, I got my cheese sauce. The cheese sauce is looking perfect. And I'm just gonna take a bunch of big old dollops of it and paint our nice toasted bread with plenty of cheese sauce. Our mushrooms are just gonna hit the roll. We don't need that many of them. Next up, the star of the show. We got our nice, crispy, caramelized, freshly sliced ribeye. Boy, is that a mouthful. And I'm just gonna lovely place this gorgeously tender, delicious, juicy steak all over the roll. This is how we make sandwiches. Couldn't be better than that. All right, so we got about 2 pounds of meat on that long roll. And now, I would say the final step, but it's not. We got 2 left. More glorious cheese sauce all over the top. Oh my God, it's cheesy. The final step is just this smoked sea salt. I love this stuff. It's such a large flake. It's got to get a shot of the sea salt. Very large granules. And I'm just going to take the smoked sea salt and I'm going to season this sandwich. And she is finished. Here we have a cheesesteak, Sawyer style, with the homemade fries to match. Oh my goodness. Not the neatest food ever, but when you go and get a cheesesteak, this is what you want to see. greasy, gooey, cheesy deliciousness. Done to perfection. The cheese sauce is really the piece de resistance. Finn, cut.